Greetings viewers, welcome to episode 5 of 7 of the CFO Case Study Competition project. We will now be looking at the global grand finale, the final 3 teams being called on stage alphabetically, starting with Team Alice Consulting from Australia. Next we would listen to Team Athena from Zambia, and we'll conclude the episode by looking at Team Snipers from Ghana. Let's take a look.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen of the board of MCOM. Good afternoon, my name is James and these are my colleagues Victor and Hugh. We're from Ale Consulting in Australia and we're here to talk about the very urgent, very time-sensitive issues that MCOM currently faces. Now, why are these issues urgent? The reason why we've had an urgent board meeting called, and we want to particularly thank the board for coming together at such short notice, is because of these 2 first urgent issues. Firstly, we've got this slump in investor confidence. The market needs to be reassured that MCOM is dealing with the issues that it currently faces. Secondly, the Nicolia fine. You currently have until the 18th of October, and that's just 4 days away, to sort out a strategy in dealing with the Nicolian fine. So we're going to take you through our strategies for both of those issues. We'll then walk you through how to deal with a strategy for the Shared Services Centre in Sedimba. You've asked for an oversight project oversight framework, and then we'll move on to the entry into the Chinese market. Finally, you've asked us for recommendations as to your new CEO. We're confident that our recommendations will put MCOM back on the front foot and deal with the current urgent issues. Let's get right into it. Victor?
Currently, we have analysed your current financial statements, and based on our recommendations, which we're about to show you, we can see that MCOM can actually be in a better position and pass the financial guidance you've given to the public so far. Based on the key financial metrics you have given to us and what your investors are most looking for, if you implement the strategies and recommendations that we're about to inform you of, you can see that you are above all those key metrics which all your investors are concerned about. You are expected to outperform that previous earnings guidance, and if done properly, you may even allow your investors about what's to come. If of particular note, and which is in our appendices, are your financial statements, which we've put through projected figures for your income statement for the year end of 31st December 2016. And of particular note is the provision which you provided for the Nicolian fine last year in 2015. The $9.3 billion that was given, initially we believe was of a material nature, and we believe it actually was a good decision to make. Based on our recommendation, we've adjusted and implemented an expense of an additional $5.4 billion. Based on recommendation, we'll go through and the strategic rationale behind it. Given that, and given all the cost-saving measures in the Sedimba SSC as well, this has resulted in a vast improvement in your ROE, as well as the earnings per share as well, and the dividends which you'll be able to provide to your shareholders. I'd like to now hand over to Hugh, who will go over our strategic rationale of the Nicolian situation.
Thanks, Victor. So the situation in Nicolian is the most important one because the Nicolian subsidiary represents the largest portion of MCOM's revenues. And the $58 billion fine is a large risk and may need to be negotiated and settled within the next 4 days. So it's a very urgent situation. One of the options that was given to us to consider is completely exiting Nicolian and not paying the $58 billion fine. Based on the DCF valuation, we value MCOM Nicolian at around 64 to 76 billion Sedimban dollars. After paying the $58 billion fine, there will be still some residual value left in MCOM Nicolian. Hence, we do not recommend exiting Nicolian and to not pay the fine. The second consideration was to pay a much reduced settlement with the Nicolian government. However, MCOM must list MCOM Nicolian subsidiary on the Nicolian Stock Exchange and have a minimum free float of 60%. We believe that currently, if you were to follow on with this, that the stock will be very undervalued by investors for a number of reasons. Firstly, there's a lot of sovereign risk because of the nature of the civil warfare and the terrorism within the country. And furthermore, investors with any money will be pulling out their money from Nicolian into other countries which are much safer in Africa. Hence, it'll be very difficult to raise that capital and to list those 60% equity on the Napoleon Stock Exchange. Hence, because of that, we rule out listing on the Napoleon Stock Exchange. This will represent a significant loss of value for your shareholders. And so that leaves really two options: either to pay a much reduced fine of 15 billion Sadiman dollars and needing to then comply with removing unregistered SIM cards off your network within the next 12 months, or paying the $58 billion fine and then negotiating and appealing the fine later. Given that you need to settle within 4 days and you don't have $58 billion of cash or cash equivalents at the group level, paying the $58 billion fine in the next 4 days is simply not feasible. Hence, we recommend paying the much reduced $15 billion fine and then complying with the legislation over the next 12 months. And so, as the board, you've given us guidance that it takes 24 months to comply with removing unregistered SIM cards off the network. However, under this settlement, you need to comply within the next 12 months. And so we view that the limitations to implementing this compliance within the next 12 months isn't because of technical reasons, because all of your competitors have been able to implement it quite rapidly. We believe that the limitations are within the customers and customer behavior. It's very difficult to motivate a customer to go and show their identification so that we now know their identities.
It's important that you not only optimize this transition and will provide you strategies to do so, but you also manage those concerns of all the stakeholders which are involved in this decision. Now, the rationale behind going through for the SSC is extremely important. You have been told you need to reform your operating model, and we believe this is definitely the right course of action to do so. Not only that, but this allows the specialization of your staff through training. Being in one place, it allows its economies of scale and scope from everyone being together, and that leads on to the most important rationale of control. Having so many operations, so many different countries, having all your servicing staff in one place allows you to control the way you service your clients and the performance levels that they are also given. Based on the breakdown and information of the current SSC transformation going into Sedimba, we've analysed 3 different parts, being MCOM Sedimba, MCOM Nicolia, and all other countries. What you can see here, it's clear that your transition from all other countries back to Nicolia is what is doing not as well. Based on your budgeted figures, it's underperforming by quite a large amount compared to MCOM Sedimba and Nicolia. And it's important to note that you've really focused on transitioning to Sedimba so far, while Nicolia actually been only 50% of the actual jobs have been shifted there. And so it's important that the board learns from what's happening in Sedimba, identify the key reasons why cost savings have been so much more beneficial in that country, and then apply it to MCOM and all those other countries. Given that you're actually not making as much as you were initially forecast to, and that the reason why you're ahead of the initial budget savings is due to predominantly MCOM Nicolia right now. Now, to manage those concerns, we believe you have to target 3 key places. Number 1 is to manage the people, your staff. These are the people who are going to be affected right away from this offshoring. And to do this, we suggest 3 strategies. First and foremost, it's important you communicate to your staff that this is not because of them, it's because of the business, and that you offer them some sort of training potentially, and offer them the opportunity to move around the business. They've been a part of MCOM for so long, they understand how to serve customers, and they may be able to be utilised somewhere else in the business. In addition, it's important that you offer them relocation offers as well, as you would need to retrain staff potentially in Sedimba if they have already been in the business for so long and they are willing to move with MCOM and its future business strategy. That would also be a way to help assuage them. Finally, you may also offer them a package if they were to leave. If they ultimately do not want to stay, it's important that you do help support them in that process to become employable later on as well. Next, it's important to manage that transition. So when employees do come to Sedimba, it's important that you train them properly. And like we mentioned, this is about optimizing your model and your costs right now. And by doing that, you need to make sure you give them sufficient training, that they understand how to serve customers. And that's done through that control that we mentioned as well. By having them all in one place, you can ensure that the message is clear, instead of having them around different sectors. And finally, to manage that outcry. Now, a lot of customers are extremely concerned about these jobs being shifted. And so it's important that you have a leader, someone who can communicate this to the public. It's also important that MCOM communicates the strategic and financial implications as well. Like we mentioned, the implications of our strategies will ensure that your ROE is increased, will ensure that the earnings per share and dividends per share as well are increased. And so it is better for MCOM, and if they're doing well and you're doing well, you can continue to expand your business and provide a better service for the customers as well. So it's not just about your staff, you're managing both stakeholders. I'd like to now move on to CloudNet with Hugh.
Thank you. So now, the situation in investing in Tunisia is a little bit more urgent. And this is because there are other potential interlopers who are also interested in CloudNet. And also, your shareholders are particularly positive about a potential investment in CloudNet, given that your share price increased by 15% after news of this was leaked to the media. However, there are a number of issues with investing in CloudNet. Firstly, it's not a publicly listed company, and hence there are no supporting financials, and so due diligence becomes very important. And furthermore, the valuation as CloudNet is particularly dependent on CloudNet being able to renew its license at the end of 2017. And furthermore, these interlopers are increasing the optimal bid price by 25%. So now it's a little bit more urgent. We need to really consider what's happening in this situation. And so given that the valuation of CloudNet is dependent on it being able to renew its license, what we're really proposing is to form a new novel transaction where we still go through the original suggestion of paying 51% for 51% equity, paying $27 billion, and then paying a further $10.8 billion contingent on CloudNet being able to win that new license. And the rationale for this is that this lowers the potential downside risk if CloudNet is not able to renew its license at the end of 2017. And furthermore, it incentivizes those executives who have relationships with the government to stay on and make sure that CloudNet is able to maximize its chances of renewing the bid. However, given that there are a number of other players who are interested, we recommend that you engage in a no-shop, no-talk clause to prevent information being leaked to other potential bidders and to ensure that you can perform proper due diligence without anyone further interloping. And all of this should really be contingent on successful due diligence. In terms of due diligence, we really believe that the most important attributes are audited financial reports. To support this valuation, we believe that the last 12-month NPAT and the last 12-month EBITDA should be more than $660 million to support that valuation in the marketplace. Furthermore, we believe that you need to evaluate operational metrics and also particular legal risks, as well as auditing the employees and the executives, because the image of CloudNet may negatively impact MCOM if there are issues there. Furthermore, given that Tunisia is a new country, we need to evaluate what are the potential country-specific risks in Tunisia. Furthermore, given that there are other potential interested bidders, you may need to consider also having a break fee to further incentivize the shareholders to sell up to MCOM. I'll now pass it on to James.
Okay, thank you, Hugh. So we've had your senior executives depart the company. That's a good thing for public relations. Now you have a trusted caretaker as your acting CEO. So what's the next chapter for MCOM? Well, let's look at how MCOM has changed in its identity. It's no longer just a telecommunications company. You're looking to be a leader in technology more broadly. You're not just a local company, now you're a global company with a lot of the recommendations that we've been talking about. Finally, now you no longer seek to be just a player in the market, but a leader in the market. So this changes the way that MCOM sees itself. We need change at the leadership level. It's going to change culture, and that's going to spread out to external factors, your stakeholders and the macro environment. So a leader, we need several traits. Firstly, we need a decisive person. We need someone who is a historically disadvantaged individual. We need someone who's a strong communicator who can put these new recommendations and manage the change management process. What experience do we need? We need someone who's got past experience running a diversified group. We need someone who's got past experience running a multinational firm. And we need someone who has a regulatory focus. Someone maybe who's worked at the regulator in the past. Finally, it'd be great to have a Napoleon, someone who understands MCOM's biggest market segment. Who's that person? Well, Mr. Olatunji Babele is your best bet. We believe he is the next group CEO, the best option, the one that you should take. So, what have we talked about today? Firstly, we need to satisfy investor concerns. Secondly, let's get the Napoleon fine dealt with. We'll pay the money and then comply with conditions within 12 months. Shared Services Centre, and we've presented an M&A strategy, and we've presented the new CEO to the board. We're now happy to take questions from the board.
Thank you so much for the insightful presentation and for taking the time to actually work with us on this. My question is on the negotiation strategy that you've outlined for us. You've advised us to take option 2, paying the $14.780 million dollars immediately.
That's right.
And then negotiating for 12 months to comply with the SIM registration. Now, considering the fact that you know that we can only raise this money outside Nakolia, so meaning we have to come back home to our shareholders in Sadimba to get this money, do you think, given the current situation and the shareholders knowing the risk, the political security risk in Nakolia, do you think that they will be willing to give us such funds to go and invest again in Nakolia? Because we would be increasing our risk exposure.
Sure. So MCOM is the parent co, and MCOM Nakolia is the subsidiary. And so we found that at the group level, MCOM has enough cash to inject that equity into your subsidiary, MCOM Nakolia. And because of that, you'll be able to fund that transaction without raising new capital from other investors. Are they your consent?
Okay, I think we as a board did take the decision that if we have to go for that option, we would have to raise new capital.
Sure.
We cannot dip into our reserves. That is very clear as a board, is a decision that we made. So if we are going by that option, we need to go back to our shareholders and ask them for more capital.
Sure. So that's a very understandable concern that you may have in terms of maintaining sufficient cash reserves. So as we've already presented in the first slide, is that your key financial metrics have outperformed previous guidelines. And that means that once you put that information out to the market, people will have a much bullish view of your equity, and so your equity price would rise. And so we believe that that may be the best time to go through with raising fresh equity, perhaps through an accelerated book build, because the equity is still quite volatile. And through the accelerated book build overnight, that may be a way for you to raise those 15 billion dollars without diluting the share price.
Just adding on to Hugh's comments, I think it's also important to consider the effect if you weren't to do this and pay it right now, and the potential implication, for example, if you were to, say, go to court and have this out and prolonged in the public. Currently in Nakolia, there's such a negative perception about MCOM, and one of the key things is about that Blancana terrorist group that's operating, and if you were to go to court and pay the fine and try to get it back, for example, that way you risk your shareholders and you risk the customers who are already considering boycotting you in MCOM Nakolia. So I think it's important that we work with the government in that sense to help them try to solve and find a solution. Maybe by getting these registered SIM cards off their network, it can definitely help improve your standing as well in that sector.
Thank you very much. Also in the Nakolia case, you mentioned that you are thinking that we will be able to be out in 12 months, although it was proved that we need 24 months. You are willing to offer certain benefits to the customers to change the contract. What is your rationale, or where the funding of those benefits will come from?
That's a very good question. So we do need to think about the funding of those benefits. So the ideal situation is that it would take about 24 months to comply with the conditions and remove all registered SIM cards from the network. There are a few costs associated with some of these incentives to get people to either register or to remove them from the network. And where those costs are going to come from is we're hoping that once we've dealt with all of these issues, and there's a lot of issues that need to be dealt with very swiftly, we should be on a new course, and that new course will hopefully see the acquisition of new customers, and over the long term, if we take a long-term view in the long-term strategy for MCOM, that those costs will be recovered.
Thank you for the presentation. If you can just discuss with the board your thinking around the acquisition of CloudNet. One of the due diligence items that I didn't see there was the projection for future earnings. Have you considered that?
Sure. So in our due diligence, what we've really looked at is what those financial metrics are and what those key operating metrics are. For example, like the churn ratio and also the customer acquisition costs, which are the key drivers in this particular industry in terms of projecting future revenues and costs. However, the key downside risk from this is if CloudNet is not able to renew its license. If it's not able to renew its license, then it loses all of its retail revenue in the telecommunications sector. And so because of this potential downside risk, that's the rationale behind why we structured the transaction to minimize the financial downsides if CloudNet is not able to renew its license. And that's why we've proposed to pay out those shareholders in 2 tranches, with the second tranche only being paid out if CloudNet is able to renew its license.
So the benefit of this deal structure is we can actually share the benefits that will come from MCOM's acquisition of CloudNet to make sure that everybody wins. We want to make sure that CloudNet gets a return off this. We want the best deal for MCOM. And so we've actually structured those financial forecasts for earnings for CloudNet into our strategy, into our deal structure, having those 2 different tranches.
Thank you for the presentation. I really enjoyed that. And thanks for the thoughts that you've so well articulated there. Just in terms of your advice not to list on the NSE, we are facing an enormous amount of pressure from the government. Okay, so we're not very well liked by them. That's our main stakeholder and regulator. The public, who are customers, are locals predominantly. And we're not big fans there either, so we're not very popular there either. They are pressing us for skin in the game in terms of enriching that local environment. I understand your view that the CEO, needs to be local in that, but that could be seen as, just kind of doing a small token something in terms of skin in the game for the country, as opposed to listing on the NSE. Whilst I understand the solid financial case behind that, can you please share with me your thinking in terms of the repercussions afterwards, and how are we going to answer for that?
I think there are different ways you can invest in a country. One is obviously to list on the stock exchange, but I think you can also invest in, say, infrastructure to help the government improve, say, their policy, or work with them and maybe do a partnership between private company like MCOM and the government itself. So you could potentially invest in, say, helping neutralize those Blancana terrorists, and maybe as well help develop that communications sector within Nicolia. We're aware that Nicolia is one of your biggest revenue earners, and so they're an extremely important part of your overall strategy. And we think investing in, say, infrastructure and kind of going with that whole technology boom as well doesn't mean you necessarily have to list your equity, because it is obviously very risky, like we went through. There's a lot of potential downside risk as well. But if you, say, improve your CSR as well and show that you're really willing to help that whole country get out of that whole terrorism that's currently taking it over, and helping customers as well with their daily lives. Telecommunication is so powerful and everyone needs it. And if MCOM can be seen as that conduit, as that champion, with that new CEO that we're going to introduce as well, then that can definitely help improve your image without particularly having to go through that listing and maybe a different manner to go about it.
Right. Thank you very much. I think to come across so calm when we called you at short notice speaks volumes, so well done. And you've articulated scenarios that are definitely food for thought on the 5 different priorities you've listed. One of the things that is key, and it was the last one you covered around leadership, because this is a turnaround story and what we're trying to do, is the candidate you recommended is an external candidate. We've got a really good leader that meets all the requirements from an HDI through to understanding the business, and operationally, if you look at your 12-month SIM card adjustment. How do you recommend, or what is your view on Ratela Miyati, and why, as an internal candidate that knows the business, he's not considered a potential option? And if he was, how would you see him working together with the CEO you've proposed?
The reason why we made the recommendation that we did is because this is a turnaround story. MCOM desperately needs not only internal new leadership, but they also need to communicate to the public in Sedimba, in Nicolia. They need to communicate that there is a new direction for the whole company, the whole group. And that's the overriding consideration that underlies our our recommendation. We did give serious consideration to your current COO as well, because of that internal knowledge. We think internal knowledge is very important, someone who knows the business well, but it doesn't necessarily communicate the kind of idea that we want to the public. We want to show the public that we are serious about turning MCOM around. We're going to take best practice from around the industry and from other industries. We're serious about making sure that regulatory compliance is a #1 consideration. And we just thought that the benefits of having someone external exceeded the benefits of your current COO.
So just in a follow-up to that, I think you mentioned it's good PR that some of the senior executive have left and you've got a change of season, so to speak. What's interesting is the metrics you've calculated are all positive, so better than previous year, very optimistic, there's all upside. What is the plan B if the 12 months does not work out? What is the risk this board is signing up to if we don't meet the fine requirements and we see ourselves paying for it? And our CEO recommendation is not a Sidimbian. What is the issue if they're not approved? So what's plan B?
Sure. So in particular, in terms of the potential risks if MCOM is not able to completely comply with the 12-month threshold of removing unregistered SIM cards off the network. And so there is always the option to remove unregistered SIM cards off the network because this is quite an easy technical problem. The limitation is that if you remove unregistered SIM cards off the network, there is potential downside revenue because you're going to lose all those customers by removing them off the network. And so that's the rationale for prolonging the amount of time it takes for customers to come and register their identification cards. So that's something that's within the MCOM's board's control. And so we don't believe that to be a significant risk.
So just to summarize, 12 months to incentivize getting users to provide their details, and otherwise flick the switch and we might lose a few customers, but we need to make sure that we do comply.
Just quickly, as a follow-on to that, what if I told you I think we should fire the CFO, or we should fire the head of audit committee, or we should at least fire the external auditor? What are your comments on that, from a governance perspective?
Yeah.
And maybe just a follow-up on that. Ultimately, the investor will look at the worst case scenario. So it doesn't matter you provide not the full amount, your share price will reflect it.
Yeah, it's very true. Well, it's obviously extremely important that auditors are independent in what they do, and that when they are assessing items that involve judgment or valuation, that they go through the appropriate amount of work to make sure that what they're showing is a true and fair valuation of what is currently the situation that MCOM was in at that time. Based upon the legal advice and the fact that you are also hiring someone from America who was able to help you reduce that fine as well, and by sounds of it, considering that there's a 90% chance you could have potentially have recovered it, we believe that's extremely important when you consider all these factors, that providing 100% was not reflective of the actual chance you had of paying that full fine in full. And so the auditors and what they've done and the work that they've conducted sounds like it was appropriate, given that auditing is not about absolute assurance, it's about reasonable assurance. And now that more information has come to light, now you can adjust properly for that actual fine.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's presentation by Athena Associates. Now, it wouldn't be prudent of us, first of all, to acknowledge all the invited guests. So first of all, the board of directors, we say a warm good afternoon. And to each and every other people present today, equally we say a warm good afternoon. Now, we as Athena Associates, first of all, like to commend the fact that you as a board have opted to utilize us once more for your services. They say that the problem shared is a problem half solved. So we would like to exculpate, to dissect, to analyze, to scrutinize, and to prioritize each and every one of your issues. For the purposes of the same, we have opted to use what we like to call the prioritization of issues. So first up, we are going to deal with the appointment of the group CEO. Now, you will all agree with me that each and every organization and entity requires a leader for it to function successfully. Henceforth, we have opted to use the same. Beyond that, we're going to look at the group legal and negotiation strategy for Nakolia. After that, we shall look at the Nakolia fine. Ladies and gentlemen, Nakolia seems to be a big problem which needs to be sorted. Hence, we feel that it should be given the required attention. Aside from that, there's the issue involving Tunisia and the due diligence. Last but not the least, we're going to have the issues of the Shared Services Center, as well as the ever-important ethics. And beyond that, I shall give you the conclusion right at the end. So let's get straight into business. We have opted to utilize a criteria as provided by you. Now, first of all, again, we'd like to commend the fact that you have opted to make this as transparent a process in choosing your new CEO. 4 options are available. And we feel that, ladies and gentlemen, based on experience, based on the fact that each and every one of them has qualifications, that you go step by step by step by step. Now, you all agree with me that a leader envisions and epitomizes what an organization is. Choose a wrong leader, and you could find yourselves destroyed as an organization. Organizations such as Yahoo have opted for people such as Marissa Mayer, and today Yahoo finds themselves in problems. Other organizations, such as BP, opted to utilize a different strategy and chose a leader who delivered on each and every one of the critical success factors that they opted for. Yes, the oil prices did reduce, but because of the leader that they had in place, ladies and gentlemen, BP is a flourishing company. So we feel as MCOM that you equally should take a similar strategy. Now, we're going to look at factors such as forward-thinking ability, the ability to take calculated risks, not just any sort of risk, but a calculated risk. This way, you can keep your money and utilize it in the way that you should. Others will include emerging market cross-culture orientation, biasness towards thoughtful action, and the balancing conflicting views. So we have opted to number each and every one of your potential CEOs as 1, 2, 3, and 4. And henceforth, we have rated them against the options. And ladies and gentlemen, at the end of the day, we feel that Mr. Mtelo Nyati is the best option. Simply because, first of all, he is readily available. Each and every one of your problems requires to be dealt with at the current time. You cannot afford to postpone them and deal with them later. So Mr. Nyati is available today. So we recommend as Athena Associates that you utilize Mr. Nyati. Aside from this, you notice that based on the corporate governance Cadbury report of the UK, it is not prudent for an organization such as yourself, which is listed, to have a person acting as the board chairperson as well as the CEO. Henceforth, we recommend that he ceases to act as the CEO and Mr. Nyati be appointed to do the same. Next up, we have the issue of Nakolia, the problem. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you find that Nakolia has a legal fine attached to it, and this fine was taken to court. You challenged the decision, and henceforth you found yourselves potentially paying a fine of $3.9 US. Now, ladies and gentlemen, no organization in the world can boast to say they can readily avail that kind of money. The options are available, are simple. We have option 1, 2, 3, and 4. Myself, I shall run you through the first option, and then I shall hand over to the ever-willing David Mwanza, who shall run you through the other 3 options. So the first option is simple. Take the unilateral action. This has 2 subparts. The first part is basically to accept the fine. Now, ladies and gentlemen, after critical analysis, you shall notice that there is a 98% chance of success. 50% is good, but 98%, ladies and gentlemen, is a great chance. So we as Athena Associates vehemently, and I repeat, vehemently recommend the first option. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it would be biased for us not to run you through the other options. So right before I hand over to David, let me just give another recommendation. You notice that an executive director from your board went out and felt the need to issue a statement. So for purposes of going forward and avoiding any further litigation, we recommend that you establish, if you already don't have one, a PR department, making sure that each and everything that is said by your organization goes through the PR, and you avoid any litigation and newspaper scandals. I shall now hand over to David.
Thank you very much. Now, my previous speaker has already alluded to the introduction to this issue. We have 4 options currently on the table in which to deal with the Nakolia fine. Let's look at the second one. This is a fine to negotiate and inject cash. You could pay an amount of 14.7 million. Now, this amount will see you pay this amount. Afterwards, you will be given 12 months in which to deal with the SIM card registration requirements. This is ample time for you to sensitize your customer base and for you to maintain them and clearly have a clear option. In terms of suitability, acceptability, and feasibility, this option passes on all of them. But comparing it against the first option is another issue. You look at the two and you see that payment under the first one, you pay 0 as the fine could be declared null and void. And this is something that we cannot ignore. Therefore, the first option passes over the second based on that issue. Then you could negotiate and list your shares. This option entails that you pay an amount of 19.8 million. Now, in paying this amount, after you will pay it over a period of 3 years. Now, in paying this amount, you also have to list your shares. You will list your shares. These are 60%. 60% of your shares means you lose control. Control is crucial. Nakolia is your highest revenue earner. In the portfolio, it brings the most revenue. Therefore, you should fight to maintain it, and therefore it cannot pass under acceptability. Let's look at the next option. The next option could be to just move out from Nakolia. Now, this market, as already alluded to, is the highest revenue earner. Therefore, it cannot pass on acceptability as it brings you the highest revenue. Let's go on to the next issue, which still resides in Nakolia. Now, you have done some adjustments to the financial statements that were given, and these are improving or providing a provision of 19.3 million on the backdrop of the fine that was given of 58 million Sadimban dollar. Now, in line with the International Financial Reporting Standards, we believe as this is not correct, as you used the strategy and the dividend policy. Now, International Financial Reporting Standards 38 state that you must use a measurement criteria that is the best estimate as at the date of the financial statements, and therefore this is not the correct method to use. We recommend, in line with the requirements of IS 37, you use the best estimate, and the best estimate of the fine is the amount that was given on the fine as at that date. Other supporting arguments for this could come from the prudence concept, which is a basis of the ISB framework, the framework that makes standards. You should not overestimate your assets or underestimate your liabilities. Therefore, we must provide for the fine as it is. Now, arguments will be made to say providing for the fine means you're accepting the fine. We choose to disagree, because you are simply complying with the requirements of the International Financial Reporting Standard so that you are not found wanting on other issues, including the one you already have. At this point, we'll go on into the next issue, which is the due diligence report.
Thank you very much. Now, members of the board, we are grateful that you took as an idea and as a decision to venture into Tunisia. CloudNet is one of the market leaders. The due diligence report that we have here has 5 aspects that will address the 5 top issues that you need to look at. Customer. Tunisia has 63 million as a subscriber base. What an astonishing statistic that is. Further, as if that's not enough, CloudNet in the Tunisian market is the broadband leader and also the technology leader. We move on to compliance, complying with the regulatory requirements. As one of the critical success factors that were put in as you are under the first bid, meeting the 7% environmental track record was one of them. And CloudNet is part of that market, which means they are meeting. Obviously, under compliance, you will be able to comply. Financial side. CloudNet has 20% market share because the 82% market share in Tunisia is shared amongst the top 4, which CloudNet is amongst them. And that means CloudNet is able to get almost 20% of the revenues thereof. Environmental and social, married to compliance. Why do I say so? Like in the critical success factors, the 7% carbon emissions that was set as an environmental track record, you'll be able to safeguard the environment you operate therein. Innovation. CloudNet, ladies and gentlemen, is the first to 4G. Married to your strategic objectives under the strategic fit. This means you will be able to combine the capabilities to move forward. And who knows, you might be the next or the first to go with the 5G. You need to move into Tunisia and acquire CloudNet. There are issues of the share offer that has come in. This means that you need the premium has now been raised from the previous acquisition, and that's what we think it is the best. From now onwards, we move on to the Shared Services Center.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're pleased to know that you are actually pleased with our proof of the 6.6 billion Sadiman dollar savings in the SSC decision. And I know from this, you are able to tell that this cost-saving initiative was actually the best in that you are able to actually deliver these savings. So you have something that you can look into. Then apart from that, ladies and gentlemen, you've decided to go ahead with the SSC decision by moving your transactions away from the other locations and bringing them to the shared location for you to deliver even more savings by the year 2016. Now, ladies and gentlemen, you've decided to go with a 4-step process, if I can call it that. You want to move your transactions in 4 gradual movements. And apart from that, we think this is the best option, actually. So we have our advantages and our disadvantages. Advantages of this gradual shift are you still enjoy the savings even as you go on with the SSC implementation. Apart from that, you please your stakeholders in that jobs are not all transferred at one time, but in a gradual process. And in that, you're able to increase awareness and you're able to sensitize the public on why this is the best decision, why you are going on with the implementation of the shared services. But then, ladies and gentlemen, there was a slight oversight in the calculations. Your budget at completion was at 7.7 billion, you said Dimban dollars, but with your actual costs of work performed, which is about 2.5, it just shows that your estimation at completion will actually bring those costs to 7.8 billion Dimban dollars, which is about 100 million increase in your initial costs. But apart from that, ladies and gentlemen, this amount cannot be put as a basis why you should not go ahead with the gradual move. And on top of that, your pros outweigh your cons, and as such, this is the best decision. And at this point, we'll now move on to the investor side of all these issues, what your shareholders are actually interested in, what your investors are looking into. So we'll look at the investor ratios as my next colleague takes over.
Now, when looking at building your strategy, there's one thing you should always look at, and that is your stakeholders. Who are your most powerful stakeholders? Who are the stakeholders that can influence your strategy? And the biggest of all those is the shareholders. Therefore, you need to build your strategy in such a way that the shareholders are pleased. In this are the financial ratios. These ratios will give a depiction of how you are meeting those needs. Firstly, we look at the return on equity employed, or the return on equity, sorry. Now, with the return on equity, we see a drop from prior year to the current year. With this, there has been a lesser drop, or to say a 25% drop from the first year, which means there is a loss in meeting those needs. And looking at the other three, which are the earnings per share, the dividend per share, and lastly, the gearing ratio. This has also been passed. The 25% limit is being crossed by yourselves. Therefore, you must pay critical attention and change your strategy so that you are now well-rounded to meet the needs of these shareholders. At this point, we'll go into the ethics.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, an organization such as yourself needs to focus on what we like to call the triple bottom line, factoring in the environment, the financial side of it, as well as the social. So it's important that you also critically analyze what we like to call the ethics. So for financial reporting purposes, it is important that you adhere to the international accounting standards, as opposed to any other standard which might inflate your revenue. As far as the implementation of the SSC is concerned, the gradual process benefits you in the sense that you're able to sensitize other people in relation to the same. For the appointment of the lawyer, ladies and gentlemen, quite right, the executive director might have issued comments directing or pointing towards the fact that you did it in order for you to gain advantage in Nakolia. But we, as Athena Associates, feel more that the appointment was based on the fact that the Chief Justice is a very experienced party who would benefit you in regard of the case. Last but not least, the selection of the group CEO. The transparency that this depicts favors you in the sense that you're able to gain by far of goodwill, and hence your share profits will gain. Last but not least, we have the various recommendations. First up, we advise that you appoint Mr. Nyati as your group CEO. We also recommend that you challenge the fine in court, you abide by the international accounting standards, that being IAS 37, as well as the prudence concept, in recognizing and accounting, and you utilize a balanced scorecard, ensuring that you as an organization meets each and every one of your requirements, as well as your strategic priorities, and henceforth continue to be the flourishing organization that you, MCOM, are today. On this note, we as Athena Associates rest our case and hopefully hope that you as an organization can go the distance. Thank you.
Thank you, Athena, for the presentation. It was very well executed. As a board member, I am extremely upset that, if I'm reading correctly, and you need to just guide me on this, that essentially you're saying we should have taken a provision in our financials for the full value of this fine, and we did not. Yeah? So what do I do about that as a board? I mean, do we go and fire the CFO? Do we whose head needs to roll in this case? Because we are obviously accountable for that.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, to say you fire the CFO would be a step too drastic.
Sorry, or the auditor or the audit committee, something's not right here.
Yes. Yes, please. So yes, to say that you fire the CFO is a step which is a bit too drastic. Clearly, as you have noticed, the statements were signed off as well by both your auditors. So what we as Athena Associates would recommend more is the fact that auditors are required to, first of all, be kept up to date and kept abreast. It's part of their professional due care and professional behavior, that they be kept up to date in terms of each and every accounting standard, each and every change in accounting standard, as well as each and every change in auditing standards. So a more prudent step would be, first of all, to basically shift the liability onto the auditors. The fact that they were employed, subcontracted basically, to look at your financials, and even they did not notice that. Furthermore, beyond this, it would also be unfair to simply let the CFO just walk away. So as a result, a stern warning is our recommendation, in the sense that the minute you warn him today, him or her, the minute you warn them today, you tell them simply that going forward, we shall not tolerate or take such action, and hence it might lead to the termination of your contract or job.
Do you think he needs a bonus?
No, totally not.
Thank you very much for the presentation. You ended up in saying the shareholders is your most important stakeholder. If one look over the years, that perception has actually changed. Previously, it was all about money. You talked about the triple bottom line as well. But how do you balance, for example, if you look at the fine? The government could keep you busy for the next 5 years. It's 50% of your business, of the group. So it will take your eye off the ball. Just share with us your thinking around that you haven't really considered the government that has, through its regulator, implement the fine and trying to resolve your issues with him.
So if I get you clearly, it is taking into account the other stakeholder being the government. Okay. So now in managing the stakeholders, it is in our presentation, we clearly depicted one of the shareholders in terms of the gearing ratios. But yes, it is important to take into account all the shareholders, not just the government itself, but the NTRA, your customers, and your internal employees. But with the government, the biggest thing is to repair the relationship. And the relationship will start with how we deal with the court case. We first need to prove our innocence in the issue, and we need to negotiate on a level playing field such that we can provide, or we can comply with their regulation through a stated time so that we don't disadvantage. We show them how us stepping back and not deactivating SIM cards there and then can help the citizens or the general public in general and repair relationships like that.
Maybe just a comment, don't you think you will, through the court case, destroy the relationship forever?
So in our opinion, we feel that the step to first of all pay the fine, even before we challenge it further, shows sincerity on your parts as a board. So the government is going to actually analyze to say, this is a party which is actually sincere in their operations. The fact that they have gone and paid the 3.9 billion beforehand. But then it's important for even the government to acknowledge the fact that no one is above the law, and the law is the law. So if your lawyer, as well as your legal section, has advised to say that there is actually, there's actually room for you to benefit legally, it's very much ethical, it's very much within your rights for you to further challenge the court case. So we feel that that option be the option that you take as a board.
Thank you very much for the presentation. One of the first points that you point out was the leadership. I think that due to the leadership that we had, we were in a big situation in Akolia. We replaced a lot of executives, and we as board were concerned about what is going to happen in the next step in the new leadership. Who is going to provide the strong engagement across the organization? We're in a distressed organization. So what is how can I be confident as a board member that Mtulu, the internal candidate, will provide this leadership? Because this person has shown us really strong skills in technological point of view, but it's still internal. How can I get confident? What is the confidence you can give me that this person will be a game changer for my organization?
That's a very good question. And based on the backdrop that we gave as to the importance of having a good leader set in place, I'm simply just going to make reference to the fact that Mr. Nyati is still around and operational in the organization already depicts the fact that he is one one person that you can rely on as far as strength is concerned. If Mr. Nyati wasn't a willing and able candidate, he would have equally probably taken a step back, if not already left. The fact that he actually even operates in Nakolia is a sign that even he is willing to go forward. So what we feel is, based on the background that he, first of all, has worked for organizations like Microsoft, he provides you with the, like you have put, the telecommunications and technological aspect of it. The fact that he's already an internal candidate means he's well aware of everything that's transpiring within the organization. So even he is put in a position where he's not starting from without, but speaking from within in the way he's going to operate. He's going to give you the required guidance, he's going to give you the required assistance. And there is a saying that there's no I in team. So there's no I in the word team. So he's not going to be operating on his own, but he's going to be backed by not only the executive directors, but as well as the non-executive directors and any other support staff that you as an organization have. So he's going to be more than well positioned to operate going forward.
I do think it's really critical around the buy-in for the SSC if you're going to put all others on board, and given the noise in Nakolia. So for us as a board, that's important that the 4 years pan out. What has been highlighted by yourselves is the results and the fact that we've performed below what our expectations were. We have 75 days literally till the end of the year, and what is important for us is how do we message that, what is the communication recommendation you have that will shape our shareholders and the market's expectation of our results. Because if the results come out and they are worse than we anticipated, your components around the funding requirements, the restored confidence, a new CEO and some of the relationships are not grounded on a solid foundation. What are your recommendations on that communication and messaging around our key investor ratios?
As an organization, there are always factors that you are in control of and factors that you aren't in control of. I'll make reference to the occurrences in Nakolia. No one could have seen the Blakonda army coming and abducting the girls, and henceforth leading to the NTRA bringing up the sanctions which they did to say all SIM cards should be registered, and if not, should be terminated. So that is a factor which you, as the board, could not basically have seen coming. But then in the same sense, there are factors that you can see coming. So as a board, what we would recommend to you is that you simply disclose as things are. That way, you are behaving ethically and in compliance with the Cadbury report in disclosing your operations to the shareholders as they are. And for purposes of going forward, even the shareholders are going to be able to analyze to say, yes, the board have done their best in mitigating the factors that they could mitigate. But in the same sense, there have also been factors which they could not have prepared for. And the board will most likely, the shareholders will most likely be able in a position now to say we're going to further support if need be, because they have seen that you are a board which works prudently, you're a board which ensures that your profits come at the end of the day as best as you can.
You want us to pay the fine now, argue later, sell off some assets in order to fund that. You want us to take the government to court and not register on the local stock exchange. I am an independent board member, I must say, but why would you not want to have skin in the game in the local country where you've got so much pressure from your customer base, who's really your subscribers, as well as from your government?
Sorry, could you come again? I
So
seem to miss
we appoint someone local,
yes,
okay, in showing support, okay? And that's about it. And we pay the fine, but we still take the government to court, okay? But the local people are putting us under pressure that we're not investing in the country. So, and you're saying don't invest in the country by listing on the local stock exchange. Why not? As in, you know, what do you think we could do to win back some kudos?
Finish it. I can take it. Okay, now, as an organization or as any business, you need to take certain approaches. And we can all agree that an organization is in business to make profits. Yes, it pursues the triple bottom line, but finances, social and environmental, financial is also one of those bottom lines. Now, looking at that, we need to maintain Nakolia because Nakolia provides the highest revenue to the whole portfolio. It brings in the highest revenue, and therefore losing it would be detrimental to the organization as a whole. And to add on that, there are also other ways in which we can show our commitment to the locals. We can intensify our CSR, go with the Forum for Stakeholder form of CSR. Like Blakonda is abducting girls and whatnot, we can put maybe cameras at border posts. In such ways, we are supporting the government and the communities.
There has been new turn of events, some good, some bad. But in all this, what is the move for MCOM?
Good day, board members. Good day, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deborah Furry, and together here with me are my team members.
My name is Abigail Amwakonche.
My name is Bismarck Oponwe-Suman.
And I'm Senyo Edu. Together we are the Team Snipers from Ghana.
We're here to present to you our updated analysis of the various issues facing MCOM. First, we'll look at the strategic position of MCOM using the SWOT analysis. Internally, MCOM's strength lies in its better internal operations due to the implementation of the shared service center. Unfortunately, its weakness lies in the loss of its key personnel, such as the CEO, as well as the group CFO. On the external side, MCOM has a great opportunity by expanding to Tunisia. However, its threat is due to the inconsistency in implementing the international financial regulatory standards. Now let's move on to the prioritization of our various issues. In prioritizing the various issues, we factored in 3 major issues: the level of impact, the level of urgency, and the SWOT analysis. And so, our first issue is the legal issue, and then the negotiation strategy in Nakolia. And the last issue is the shared service center project overview.
Now, the first issue, which is the group legal and negotiation strategy for Nakolia. Now, here's the new twist. MCOM has information that Nakolia would want to improve its relations with the US. And even though the executive director has stated, and I quote, it is very clear that the fine reduction is not possible, we still think that we can capitalize on the information available to us. Now, the options available are, the first option is to take a unilateral action. If the company decides to take a unilateral action, in which case we pay the fine immediately, we know that this is going to affect our market capitalization by a whopping 25%. What if we decide to go ahead with the court case, knowing very well that we have 98% chance of winning the case? In this instance, my question is, how are we going to stand with NTRA? What happens to renewing our license in subsequent years? Now, the next option, option 2, is to negotiate and inject cash. Are we in a good position to release cash to the tune of 14.7 billion Sadimban dollars? This will have a great effect on our cash flows, knowing very well that we have to bring these cash flows from outside Nakolia. Now, the third issue is to negotiate and stagger payments. This will reduce the strain on our financials. Also, we realize that 60% free float of shares to the Nakolian public will make the Nakolians feel a part of our company. Let's also not forget that we have 12 months to register SIM cards, and therefore this will reduce a loss in our subscriber share. The final issue is to pull out of Nakolia. As a company, is this what we really want to do? Based on the Johnson Scholes and Whittington SAF test, is this option suitable? No, because it is against our company's strategy. Is it feasible? No, because moving out of our biggest market is a wrong move. Is it acceptable? No, because shareholders are not going to accept this. The best option, therefore, is option 3, to negotiate and stagger payment. Not only does it reduce the stress on us in paying the fine, it also helps us to have ample time to register. It also reduces earnings volatility. The next issue we want to look at is the appointment of CEO. Losing the group CEO, the group CFO, the CEO of Nakolia, and the head of corporate affairs is a big blow to us as a company. Fortunately, we have the board chairperson, who is a former CEO, stepping in for us. However, this defeats the very essence of good corporate governance. Having the board chairman doubling as the CEO is a wrong move for us and affects the direction of the company. Looking at the various short list of candidates we had, we, however, think that Nofundu Kunene is the best person for the job. Not only does she have good experience, she has an impeccable performance and also has a good background which we need. We can, however, consider Olatunji for CEO for MCOM Nakolia because he has background in Nakolia, and then Johan for Group CFO. Let's not forget that we have to give them orientation and good training to help them fit into their roles. Let's look at the rest of the issues.
Now, moving on to the third issue, which is the accounting for the 58%, for the 58 billion Nakolia fine. Now, MCOM has currently published its financial statement that has actually been audited, and then as against regular practice, the company has put in there an amount of 9.2 billion that has been the contingent liability made. The question is that why are they not following what the standard says? And then the justification for this is that they're saying that if they put the 58 billion, they put the 58 billion there, it would provide adverse evidence against them in the court hearing. What do we want to do? Do you want to do the right thing or to do the comfortable thing? That is why we have analyzed, first of all, based on what the standard says. IAS 37 says that for an amount to be recognized as contingent liability, it must meet 3 basic criteria. First of all, it must be a present obligation from a past event. Secondly, it must be probable and must be measured reliably. And lastly, it must lead to the outflow of economic benefit. The fine amount of $58 billion meets this criteria. What about being prudent? As accountant or as a business, being prudent is essential. It is better to even overstate your expenses and end up paying a less amount than to understate them and having to realize that you need to pay extra. That is no good. It is simply creative accounting that MCOM is practicing. And lastly, good business practice. For a business or an MCOM for that matter, what a business needs is good business practice. To stay as a going concern, their stance on good business practice should not be compromised. We therefore recommend that, first of all, MCOM should comply with the accounting standards. Also, the company should consider the company should consider rotating their auditors. We believe that their strong relationship with the auditors has probably, has some adverse effect on the objectivity of the auditors. We obviously don't want to replicate the issue of Enron and Atta Anderson. We don't want to do that. And lastly, the internal controls of MCOM in the finance and accounting department must be very tight. Why do you put such a wrong figure on the financials? Internal control must be very tight.
Now, business decisions involving mergers and acquisitions are extremely important and tactical for multinational corporations. Now, our company, MCOM, is just about to actually enter Tunisia, which is very important, and due diligence cannot be overemphasized. We look at the following in terms of due diligence. Analyzing the free cash flows flowing from Tunisia, we had an amount of NPV, positive NPV, at $1,927 million as positive NPV, which we think is good cash for MCOM. 2, looking at the share-for-share exchange. Now, share-for-share exchanges usually have an issue bordering around control, because some companies are worried about losing control when they exchange shares with another company. We have nothing to worry about at all. The CloudNet only acquires a portion of about 1.43% of MCOM PLC as a result of this share-for-share. It is a good offer. Moving on, our gearing ratio. It is imperative we secondly critically examine our gearing ratio and improve it from the current 88% to 100% to improve our chances of winning the bid. Also, we should be able to capitalize on CloudNet's 4G access to actually improve data usage in Tunisia. Moving on. Ratios are fundamental in the assessment of a company's performance, and MCOM is no exemption. Now, the board rightly asks us to have a look at 4 critical ratios: the return on equity, earnings per share, DPS, and the leverage ratio compared to the past year, and make sure that fundamentally or importantly, they have not worsened over 25% over this 1-year period. Mr. Board, the good news is that they have not worsened over this 1-year period. Thank you.
Now, moving on to the last issue, which is the shared service center decision, the overview. Clearly, the board believes that we can cut down the cost, and I believe that is true. How do we do that? Now, let's look at it. Now, the assumption is that we would spread the cost of the shared service center over 4-year period, which means that every year we just take 25% of that amount. And then the calculation reveals that the actual amount that has to be absorbed for the year is 1,921 million Sadivan dollars. But then the actual amount, the actual cost of the work we have performed is also 2,552. The simple mathematics tells us that the difference is 630.75 in cost savings alone for this year.
Now, business issues involving ethics are ones that should be handled with a lot of care and tactic. The question is, what is ethically wrong or what is ethically conniving about appointing a competent attorney such as the former US Attorney General? Now, the issue over here is that we realize that critically, we appointed him because we realize that the Napoleon government seeks a favor from the US government. This is not just wrong, but breaches good business practices. It is important that we actually realize, secondly, that because we're actually taking the case out of court, we should be able to look at what it means to actually have a second review at the appointment of this US attorney. Recommendation: we believe it is important for us to actually abrogate the contract with the US attorney and change our lawyer. Thank you so much, and we are grateful. In conclusion, we believe that our company, MCOM, is indeed a going concern. And given the recommendations thus far and good corporate governance, compliance of law and order, our company rises to the echelons of success. Thank you so much for your audience. Good afternoon. We shall now take questions from the board.
Okay, thank you so much, Team Snipers, for a very insightful presentation. We appreciate the time. My question to you is around the negotiation strategy that you have recommended. You are advising us to go for the option to stagger the payments and list on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Now, this option means that we will be giving up 60% of our equity. Effectively, you are advising us to give up the control of our company in Nakolia. So I need you to share and advise this board. What does that mean for us in that market? If we are giving up 60% and we're giving up the complete control of our company, do we still need to be there? And also, how do you think our shareholders at home here would take that news? And how will it affect our market here? Because I am very sure you know that it is going to affect us. So just give us some insights on that.
Okay. I'll take that question. Thank you very much for your question. I mean, most importantly, we face a crisis in Nakolia, and everybody agrees. And it is important we realize that Nakolians have an apathetic attitude towards the company. Nakolia is a very important market to us as MCOM PLC. And the attitude of Nakolians towards MCOM is very important. Making Nakolians feel a part of the company and owning a part of the company is a right step in the right direction. It is also important for us to know that issuing 60% of our share capital doesn't necessarily mean that we are losing control. I mean, to a great extent, offloading on the stock exchange allows a great number of people to actually buy shares. We retain a greater portion of 40%, which is good for decision making on the board level. Thank you.
And just to add to this, what we mean by floating the shares and giving the Nakolian people 60% means that we are making sure that not just one person has a very large chunk. So we can still regulate that and make sure that we still have 40% and we are still the higher.
Yeah, and even in addition, that's more to that. Equity shareholding doesn't have an impending liability of paying dividends at the end of every financial year. And we're in a situation where we actually need the money very badly, and going in for this deal is a fantastic offer. Thank you.
And then to the issue as to what our shareholders back home would say, the issue is that MCOM right now, if we don't maintain our stake, we would totally lose the license. It is better to have than have nothing.
Thank you very much for the presentation. It was really concise and short. On the leadership point of view, you're suggesting that the new CEO is the current COO. Yeah. In the history shows that the leadership has not shown a really strong succession planning. Now we are moving to a new step in the organization. What is your assurance that this suggestion of the new CEO will give the right future leadership that MCOM needs now?
First of all, I would like to take that one. Now, the CEO has been part of the business, so he knows the operations of the business. He has the experience also, and he also has an MBA. Now, what it means is that he has good leadership skills because of the MBA. He's an accountant, and we do not necessarily need somebody who has technical ability, but we want somebody who can be a good leader. Now, with the issue of succession plan, we believe that the company has not done that in the past. But as it goes on, we can groom other people in the finance department or even in the accounting department, so that they learn the managerial tips and tact of becoming a CEO, so that subsequently they can take on from there. Because amongst all the people that we analyze, he has the experience, she has the experience. She has been in the company for a while, and she has the leadership capability to steer the business into success.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. If you can just expand a little bit on the M&A activities, which specific key focus areas you want to focus on? I couldn't get that quite from the presentation.
Come again.
The key focus areas when you're going to do your due diligence. What's the key focus areas that you will look, that would be critical for you? Because from that I couldn't get what would be critical success factors to say yes, we do it or not.
Okay, thank you. First of all, the previous analysis, first of all, we want to make sure that the investment is viable, it's a good one. What exactly do we mean? What we mean is that, does it yield positive NPV or positive inflows, even in spite of the premium or the adjustment made? Because we have to pay a 25% premium, and our share price has also increased by 15%. So doing the calculation, do we still earn a positive NPV if we go into this investment? That's the first thing. The outflows or the money that we get by taking this venture. That's the first thing. And the second one is the share for share exchange. Do we lose control of our company because we are giving out some of our shares to CloudNet by way of acquiring 51%? How much of the amount we give them is worth our share? Our calculation indicates that it's just 1.43% of our shares. And then the last one that we would like to look at is also the stance with government and regulatory body. We want to find out, what is CloudNet's stance with the government and regulatory body? Are they a kind of business that the company or the country or the government